Welcome to this morning's Welcoming Table Talk. We are so grateful to have Carla Brown-Njai and Dr. Beth Birmingham with us today. I want to touch on some of our partners, CBE International, Wheaton College, Tear Fund USA, and DAI, all partnering with us. While you look through the platform, much of this is coming from these organizations, and we are so excited to have them as partners. I just want to share this short little video. You'll see some footage from our conference in October.
As women, we often talk about a sisterhood. And when it comes to the way that we as women engage, it's always about making the circle bigger. It's never about closing the circle, it's always expanding. And the Alliance, I believe, we want to expand the circle of sisterhood, not from the US. Sisters are doing this work throughout the world.
There is a deep, deep appetite to have these kinds of conversations. And the spaces to talk about this seem relatively limited. What's important about this is that men have to understand that they are central to this advancing the roles that women have to play in leading in our organizations and playing leadership roles on our boards. And until that happens, we actually will not have the kind of impact in our organizations that we want to achieve and that we absolutely need to achieve.
In a way, what we're doing here is going against powers. And so for us to have a place where we can come together and get strengthened, I think that's a really important space because this is not going to be a sprint. This is going to be a long-term commitment. I've seen the impact alliances and groups like this can have in really shifting public opinion. I think the more we can have large groups of women participate, people will not be able to ignore us. And the advocacy we can do as a group, as opposed to what one or two or three women can do alone, is just so much bigger and better. I'm interested in that kind of all of us coming together to advocate for this very important cause.
We want to talk about our logo really quick so that when you see it, you have an idea of what it means to us. Around our table, represented by the center circle, Christian women from across the world, represented in the different colors, will gather together with each other and with welcomed allies, represented in the gray, under the unified commitment to Jesus Christ in everything that we do, which is represented in the cross shape of our logo, for the purpose of expanding women's influence and leadership in the development sector in order to achieve greater results in ending poverty in all of its forms. The legs of the table that we stand on are providing community, advocacy, restoration, and equipping one another in order to stand together at that table. And so if you'd like to check these out, this is all under the About Us page on our website. Do you love Jesus? Do you want to see a better world for women and girls? And do you want to end poverty in all of its forms? If you want to participate in all of that, I really implore you to join the Welcoming Table and be a part of this organization and community. Today, we have two guest speakers, Dr. Beth Birmingham. She's a steering committee member and a huge piece of the foundation of the Christian Alliance for Inclusive Development. Really excited for her to kind of shift into a new role and move forward with that. She also just wrote this book, and I was joking about how many tabs end up happening on my books when I read them. There's a book sharing forum on the Christian Alliance for Inclusive Development website. And so if you have a book, please pop it in there. We'd love to educate ourselves a little bit more. Great read. Her and Ava wrote that together, and it's well worth it. And then we also have Carla Brown-Njai. She's been working in development for 25 years. She started with the Peace Corps and has spent a significant amount of time in sub-Saharan Africa. New changes in her life have brought her to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I want to welcome each of you.
Yeah, so we wrote the book recognizing that a systemic problem needed a systems approach. And so that's where, in our book, we go through that. Well, then 18 months later, Emily Sarmiento and I are on a call and we start talking about the need for the Christian Alliance or some network that brings women and male allies together to help influence the sector to create better spaces of belonging. Why is that important? Because we see in all this corporate research, when you have greater diversity around your table, you have better performing organizations. Well, if you take that same concept back to our faith-based ministries, why wouldn't we want to see better performance out of our faith-based ministries? Because that means more people with houses, more people with water, more people freed from human trafficking, on and on and on. But we do historically come from a sector that has been monocultured and monogendered in its leadership and influence. And so we recognize that good intentions can only take you so far in changing that, because we do operate in a disaster mode. You've probably been in an organization where seeing an increase in women was a priority. And then the next disaster that hits, it's backburnered, because that's, the attention of the organization then has to go to where, the latest disaster takes us. And so we feel like we're at a tipping point now where we can't keep putting this back, because the way our organizations respond to that next disaster could be dramatically improved if we have greater diversity around our tables. So that's sort of the backdrop of the need for the Christian Alliance. And you saw the different areas of coming together as community, bringing voices together for advocacy, spiritual formation and spiritual healing that we all need, and leadership development and equipping. Those are the 4 areas, the 4 legs of the table, if you will. But we started talking about, you can't be and help influence other organizations if we're also not thinking about how do we live out being a network that really makes people feel like they belong and has a shared power structure. And what does shared decision making look like when we're trying to be an alliance of women and male allies from all around the world? So different cultures and just ideologies, so how do we bring that together? So our conversation today is one that Carla and I have started amongst ourselves. And we'd actually like one of the outcomes to be a small group of people who are committed to helping us enact some of our desired outcomes, so a working group to come of this, because we want to be very intentional within the Christian Alliance that we are a space where a woman from Johannesburg, there you are, feels like she has absolute full ability to criticize, to critique, to bring her leadership ideas to this space. That it's not, oh, let's go ask Beth Birmingham if we can do this. Let's go ask the steering committee if we can create this event. But where people feel like this is your space. This is a space that you share and co-own with us. And I realize it takes a lot to get there, but that's what I want us to talk about today. So I'm going to introduce my sister Carla, who attended one of our very first orientation sessions that we did back, I don't even remember how long ago that was, Carla, and was asking these very questions. How are we going to make sure the space where people who don't feel like they've been welcomed before feel like they have an authentic space? So Carla, you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you, Beth. It's interesting hearing you talk, because I think it's clear the passion that comes out and the importance of this, but equally the complexities. And I often like to point out the complexities because if we don't kind of recognize that they're there, it's much harder to move forward and to kind of hone in on them and address them. So, I got interested in this because in just overall, as Beth and as was said, I lived overseas. I've been in sub-Saharan Africa for probably 17 plus years. And while I loved the work, what I have felt is that how much are we really moving the needle? We are helping individuals. I mean, I did school feeding, I've done public health, I've done agriculture. We're always moving the needle in terms of, making slight steps for someone's life, to improve an individual's life. But the systemic change that needs to happen if we really want to move a country, that's where there are always challenges. And so there have just been a lot of internal questions I've been asking. And some of that has to do with, how much are we really engaging? How much are people really at the table when you're talking wherever country you're in, that national community are really at the table? They'll, individuals always appreciate a project, but how much is their voice in place so that their culture is integrated into whatever solutions are put forth? How much is the reality of community and commitments to community and commitments to family really fully integrated into whatever you're doing? How much is the roles of women even, integrated? Often there's this, I tell people about it, we say that women don't have a voice. But in certain communities, what you learn is when there's a community meeting, no decisions are made. People go home, husband and wife in their privacy of their house, have a conversation. So the female voice may be coming out, just not in a public setting. So there are different ways of communicating, and how do we integrate that and understand it as we move forward in our work? And so I give that background just to say, for me, when I'm looking at the Alliance, all of that has to be taken into consideration, especially as you look at a global community. If you look at the community from Latin America, how the relationships between men and women and power structures have been navigated and managed is not going to be the same as an Africa context, an Asia context, etc. And how does one begin to give recognition to that? We're not trying, in my view, we're not trying to integrate. We're trying to respect culture and embrace culture and bring it into a space where it can be, if you will, in our arms. And positives and negatives positive things can be taken and shared. And so when I looked at the Alliance, for me, I found it an interesting place because Christians and other faith-based organizations have always been leaders on some kind of human issues, healthcare around the world, US, Africa, Europe. Church has always been a prominent figure. If you look at education, the same thing. So now we're moving into another space where cultures, we are one global family. We're in an environment where there's so much polarization and people not being warm to each other. What's our role? And how can we bring, values and recognition, and I'll say more equality, just for lack of a way to say it, between the two groups, men allies and women, and make sure that these voices are heard. So this is why Beth and I think I've been talking a lot about it. Power structures, what does it mean if finances are, one group is financing, and how does another group internalize that when they're brought to the table? And if they're internalizing in such a way that they don't feel that they can fully communicate or fully be present, what does that mean? Historical context, if you've been in an environment where there's been colonization, how does that affect your ability to show up? And what do we do to make the environment such that you can recognize that and then come as your full self? I don't want to take up too much time, Beth. I just wanted to kind of give that as an introduction.
No, and this really is, this portion of our conversation is a conversation between you and I, just to help people understand how we got to where we are. So let me put it in, in the Alliance context. One question is this just a group of Christian white women? Is that what the alliance is for? And Loretta, you're laughing, so obviously it's come across your mind. Because they're, you know, the original faces on this were Emily Sarmiento and I. Even though we had a steering committee, you know, 7 different countries represented, 12 women from, you know, around the world, the voices, the people who are the first voice out of the gate tend to get assumed they're leading it. It's their thing, you know, and because we are 2 Americans. And we've had women of color say, you know, white women shouldn't be leading justice initiatives, especially when it comes to diversity, because, you know, yeah, for a variety of reasons of stuff going on here in the United States. And so where do we, you know, have a space to be initiators of this for gender justice when, you know, we ourselves have either experienced the challenges of injustice or inequality, or have seen it, you know, regularly played out in our organization. So that was one question. Another question, is this just a Western women thing? So is this just going to be a Christian alliance for Americans, for Canadians, for Europeans? Is that the purpose of it? And to that we say a resounding no. Our vision, you know, for the longer term future is that the majority of members are women and colleagues around the world. So the majority coming from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America. So what does it take to get there is our question this morning, for people to feel like the Christian Alliance is a South African thing. I can keep picking on my Johannesburg sister. The Christian Alliance is a Filipino network. The Christian Alliance is, you know, what's it going to take to get there? And we'd be curious to hear in the networks that you participate in, how do you feel that sense of ownership? What does it take for you to get to the point where you feel that sense of ownership in decision making, ownership in activities that, you know, happen within the alliance, etc. So how many of you are part of another type of network? I know some of us are part of MICA. Yeah, Harry. What's your sense of that belonging, you know, that feeling of full participation? Do you recall how it is that you came to feel that way, or is it not important to you?
Well, it seems like most of the MICA Global leaders are women, or at least the ones that are on staff there in South Africa. So I don't think it's a serious problem. That's where I first heard about this, was at a MICA Global. Well, there was a Connect or a teaching, I forget which one it was. But so I think that's positive, but I don't think we're hearing from everybody at MICA Global.
Yeah.
So I'm not certain how much everyone has bought into this. I'm also in SIL, so I just promoted this particular group on SIL's internal Facebook page. Got a few likes, but yeah. One challenge in the United States, we had talked in a small group about things being toxic in the United States. Using inclusive in anything is a red flag for certain Christian groups in the US. Yeah. And so Kate King from the UK had asked me about that, and I said, well, tough luck. If people don't like it, sorry. So I just promoted it anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know whether that answered your question.
Yeah, no, well, and we vetted probably 120 different iterations of names. And we spent months as a steering committee on it. And we just kept coming back to the same reality. This word is what we mean. And we need to reclaim this word out of the political arena, out of the, you know, So that's why the 3 questions. Do you love Jesus? Do you want to see a better world for women and girls? Do you want to see poverty ended in all its forms? Then you are welcome here. So,
Beth,
yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think this is an important place when we're talking about belonging and inclusivity that I'd like to highlight. This question of an inclusive environment. Again, in my experience living internationally, literally families have Christians, Muslims, Protestants, all in the same family. I'm not saying all countries are like that, but my point really is, what is it in those environments that allow for that and allow for people to embrace a difference, but ultimately their love for God, however they come to God. And when you look at something like that, and you can take it into an organization like this, for me, that's a spark of belonging that's outside of individuals, right? That you can recognize something from an African culture, and I'm sure there's something equally as valuable in Latin American culture or Asian culture that can be salt and pepper for an organization like this. To me, that helps to spark belonging in a concrete way that's not language. And I thought that was a wonderful example that you brought up.
Yeah, and even Harry's example of people saying, I mean, this is our challenge. How do we get past our differences when it comes to a word? The word inclusion, which once upon a time was such a beautiful word. And people might not want to be part of this group because of fear of a word. Now the word has more power than the spirit that has brought us together. The spirit of Christ wanting to welcome us around his table with all of our failures, with all of our sins. And so how do we make sure that we stay at the table when somebody uses a word of inclusion, or somebody misspeaks, in a webinar session or a networking session, and they sounded way too colonialist, and so this isn't the space for me. Or feminist, they sound way too angry feminist, so this isn't the space for me. How do we create that environment and that commitment within this alliance of people to stay at the table, because we are all united in love for Jesus, wanting to see a better world for women and girls, and wanting to see poverty ended. Yeah, Esther.
Well, perhaps it's nothing new here, but just to share that I found what Carla just said, how people manage to accept differences while affirming their own stand on different things, is that they focus on shared elements. So shared humanity, shared objectives, shared values, shared whatever it is. And so I wonder whether talking more about that, do you love Jesus, do you want to see a better world for girls, etc., those things, the focus, very simply put, to talk more about it would actually allow us to go in and let people listen to what there is to say and the space that's there. And then they can warm up to the language that is used when they like it or are comfortable with it or not. So I don't know, Carla, but that's what I have observed in the shared humanity and shared, like either shared challenges or shared objectives or something like that, shared values. That often is a very solid thing that allows to just have the necessary tolerance when people speak wrongly or offend you or are in a different space than you personally are.
Yeah, I love that. There are actually boards of directors who do that regularly. So they start their meetings off with a review every single time of their shared values. What are we committed to? And that helps then as you then move through, you know, meetings to keep that unifying identity in front of you.
Annette had her hand up. I don't know if she's still available to respond.
Annette, are you with us?
Feel free to interject when you'd like to. We have a note from Beth. It says, I'm in the arts and in the networks. I'm in that sector. A sense of belonging is created by one, regular e-newsletter that are highlighted by upcoming events, virtual and in person, that the network organizations are having, annual conferences, regular learning opportunities like this for discussion tables. I have also seen a network that was very intentional about identifying the boundaries around guidelines that prevent using space to steal people from one another's organizations, not place for a job recruitment, not place for a job recruitment. Beth,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Sure, I could. In the last comment, this was an organization I came across in Cambodia that was a network. It's called Chab Dai, that had a whole bunch of different organizations that were all working on the same cause, and they just were extremely explicit of why they were coming together, that I found incredibly refreshing. And one of the points that really stood out to me was that because they were all in a similar space, they had found that there was division that would be created because of one organization using that time together to build relationships and network, but then take people to their organization or whatever. And that eroded the sense of community and trust and what the purpose of those gatherings were actually about. And I don't know if that's what you want to consider for this one or not, but it was certainly a striking to me that they, by the time that I was introduced to them, they had come to the place where that was actually one of the guidelines for that community.
Oh, interesting. I'm smiling because those around the table that work for NGOs know that the poaching is such common practice in the faith-based NGO sector. Years ago, I ran a program in partnership with World Vision International to train up leaders. And we approached another big NGO with the same partnership idea. And they said, oh no, we're just gonna wait till you finish training them all up at World Vision, and then we'll go in and steal them from World Vision. And it'll save us paying the money of investing in their leadership development. I appreciated their honesty, but yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, exactly, Harry. Yeah. Yeah, so one of the other realities, where did that voice come from?
It's your sister from Johannesburg.
Oh, there you go.
And please don't mind the sound in the background. There's bad thunderstorms happening, but I'm safe. I think. And I appreciate Esther. I appreciated that. That thing that brings people together, that we have a common goal or something in common, because if you can look at Africa as a soccer loving continent, but that we could not make it to the finals. Morocco was our hope. But if you look at, the different backgrounds you all come from, but when you put all the soccer-loving Africans in the stadium, it is one thing that they have in common, for that, for the love of the game, and the fact that either the other team is the enemy, and they're working together towards that. But also what I think is very key And I'm speaking from a point where at the moment I am I'm an online student in an American institution. And one of the things that I'm picking up I'm not that shy, right? I think. I also belong to a denomination that is global. So we interact with Americans all the time. What I find is there is a group of non-Americans that when we come in, we might have a shared goal, but because of the culture and because of some personalities that we come together at the table with, there isn't that much of opportunity that is given to share. So pause, there's no moment to pause and say, does anyone have anything to say? Because we were culturalized that way to either respect our elders or to respect whoever is leading, that is inherent in us. It's not because we're shy, it's not because we don't have anything to say, but because of the culture, that happens a lot. That's the first thing. The second thing is creating an environment where some of us are tired of the Messiah complexes that some Americans come with. And I know Beth said this is a safe space. So I'm being as safe as possible.
Yeah.
So we're tired of the Messiah complex. We have something to share.
Yeah.
I think Carla can agree. It is, I mean, the wisdom that you shared, that's what my grandmother used to tell me, that don't think a wife is voiceless, but that decision was a joint decision, because that man said, guys, I need to sleep over it. Sleeping over it means I need to sleep on it. Sleeping on it means going to the wife and say, they want us to buy cows. What do you say? And then he comes back and he's not gonna say, my wife said this, but it was a joint decision. So there is some wisdom that we carry because some of us were raised by our grandmothers, and we have this wisdom that the world, most of the world said it's pagan, it's this, it's that, but it's just wisdom.
Yeah.
That we can share. But when the table feels like it's a rescue mission, it's going to be mission impossible.
Yeah.
If you don't,
I'd
if you don't
actually
mind,
like to, go ahead.
go for it, Carla. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I wanted to pick up on what Laredo said, and the big takeaway for me is the question again of space, to understand communication and space, and the recognition of how different cultures function. And there's often, I mean, US culture, and I know less about European culture, but I'm going to venture is, time management, we got to move things along. Have we gotten everything? We're counting to the minutes, that type of thing. Other cultures don't function that way. And there's an interaction that needs to happen to get to a solution. And I think when you're looking at the alliance, if you want to make it something that people feel that they belong to, there has to be an inherent recognition of that, so that these values are part of the process and part of moving things forward. That's going to be the critical element. And it means, the question is, how do you bring certain people to the table? And there are many techniques. We don't have much time left to talk about that. But I think the question becomes, how do you bring people to the table that will continuously or raise their hand to challenge sort of what I'll call the American model, or the that has been in place so much in sort of the development sector and leads it systemically, right? Like, we do have funders, all those kinds of things, but this space may need to be pushing back on that. And so I'll land there.
And to be clear, this space wants to be pushing back on that. We don't want to follow the same model of leadership, of participation or pseudo participation that we feel has gotten us to this point of monocultured, monogendered voices leading the way. And so if we want it for your organizations, we want to figure out how to model it as a network ourselves.
In that same spirit of allowing space, I know, Annette, you posted a comment in the chat box and along the same lines and had a kind of the same thing. I don't know if your microphone is able to come back on, but I wanted to give you another opportunity if you are able.
Oh, I am able. Thank you so much. Thank you for a great conversation on what we are speaking about. And I just wanted to emphasize through my comment there that I've had the opportunity to meet in different places amongst the members when we are doing a conversation, including normally the triennial, the one after 3 years meeting physically. But for COVID, effects, we've not met. And I felt this conversation, which is being, fostered now by Christian Alliance, would be a very, very good topic for the members, because we normally meet, people of different cultures, people who I want to put in quotes, who say Christians, but they are not observing really what is we are discussing on the table here. I was wondering how Beth and the whole team at Christian Alliance can really make this conversation go to a bigger, family of Micah, because to me, it gives level for what I imagine will be in heaven, where all of us, are on the table and speaking at the same wavelength. We are all given that opportunity, to speak, not because I'm a woman or you are a man. No, that is the world we are looking towards. So how far are you able to stretch as Christian Alliance to our whole bigger family? And I speak this, as an African, knowing what happens back there, home in Africa. Yeah, we tend to have that diversity challenge, where a woman is, pictured in a different wavelength, until of recent, a few African leaders are realizing when you put them in the limelight, oh, they perform, they do this. Yeah, that's my, wondering, how are you going to extend it further so that it doesn't actually end on this small table today? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Annette. And that's a great question. And one I would challenge, those of you that are part of the MICA network. Deborah would welcome any of these topics for her monthly MICA Connect or MICA Learn sessions. And so raising it with her, she and I meet once a month together to talk about how the Alliance for Christian Alliance for Inclusive Development and MICA Global can collaborate more. And so like I said, I think she would absolutely welcome that.
I see Jennifer.
Hi, thanks. I do just need to jump off the call quickly, but I just wanted to, for one, just say hello, because this is my first time to be in a meeting with the Alliance Network. I've only just joined recently. So nice to see you on here a little bit more about what you do and what the goal and the dream is for this network. And as I've been listening, just one thought that came to my mind from my own experience, which is I used to, up until March of this year, I worked for Tearfund UK, where I've been for 11 years, and I was coordinating the Latin American branch of a leadership development program. And we tried to use the means of technology, of internet, of digital connecting, because we have people from across the whole continent, leaders who are on the ground, who are not part of a large organization, very little to no funding behind them, but who have this great dream and vision and are just getting on and doing the job. And I was there pre-COVID and post-COVID. And we found post-COVID, we took on some new, it's called the Inspired Individuals Program. We took on some new leaders, and we found it was a big difference in how they connected when they had never met each other personally, face to face. I mean, pre-COVID, it's expensive, but Tearfund was very generous and gracious to put money behind getting these people together every once in a while. And those face-to-face meetings that transformed the connection that we had virtually. After that, it made it, people were not always, of course, but more engaged, more confident that their voice mattered. They knew people personally because they had sat over a meal with them, and sometimes been in each other's houses or, whatever we could facilitate. So I don't make that as a suggestion that, I don't know how that would work necessarily. There's the reality of distance and money and all that. But what I found with the people that I was working with is that there's nothing that can replace the face-to-face contact when it comes to encouraging people to engage and take ownership in a network like this. Having said all that, I need to say goodbye, but it's lovely to be here with you all, and I look forward to joining you again in the future.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to follow up with you on some of that thinking after you hop off. So thanks for coming.
That's great. Thank you. Take care.
So she raises a good point, and here's an alliance. Right now, we've got a few hundred members. Soon enough, we're going to have, we have our membership drive that starts in February. No membership fees anymore for the Christian Alliance. You become part of it, you join the platform, no barriers to entry. So we're hoping 1,000 in 2023. And how do we, again, create this sense of belonging with an ever-growing, ever-changing space when a lot of the connectivity is through the internet, but there will also be opportunities for face-to-face. And so I would love for you, our tactic for face-to-face gatherings is to not add another conference to your calendar, but we will come alongside and tack on to existing development conferences around the world where we feel like, they're ripe for having a day or two Christian Alliance, some speakers, some conversation, this topic. So for example, one of Deborah and my conversation yesterday is the next MICA Global Gathering in 2024. They're still talking about locations and time of year, but we will add 2 days to it or a day to it. And then people that come to that can then stay and be part of this conversation. Same thing for, so if you know of Christian conferences that bring together Christian development employees, send them to us. We know of some, the Integral Alliance. Here in America, we've got the Accord Network, et cetera, et cetera. But if you know of others, send them to us. And you can send it to info@the-christianalliance.org so that we can start to look. And it doesn't mean a bunch of Americans roaming around the world. We have steering committee members. We're, launching a new advisory team. People in, Nadine Bowers-Chatoit can do something in South Africa. She can rep and pull something together. So we have people from all around the world that are deeply immersed in the origins of this thing, because we've been working together on it for a year now before we launched. So Jerry, I wanted to pull you in because I noticed you had taken yourself off of mute. I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to speak up.
Oh, I think I'm still on mute. Don't have anything particular to offer. There's value in meeting together, and there's value in networking online. There really is. I think we've learned how to do that with COVID. It's not ideal for many reasons, but it's good. And it's much better than we had it when we first started out working many, many, many years ago. And one of the reasons I'm here is I have a lot of young staff who I'd like to see grow up into leadership roles. Some of them are already in leadership roles, and they need opportunities. They need the opportunity to learn from others. So this is a good opportunity, and so that's why I'm here.
Yeah, great. Well, and we call this a member serving members community. And the reason why the metaphor table is so lovely is, some of us have put some dishes out on the table. And you'll come and say, oh, that's nice. There's 2 or 3 dishes for us to participate in and to partake of. But, we need Laredo to come and bring the milk tart for the table, or, bring your dish. So whether it's, hey, I'd love to be a coach, I'd love to be a mentor, I do a great leadership development workshop, I do a great, fill in the blank workshop that I would love to bring it, because, it's so simple for you to create an event and invite people in the Alliance to it. And you may get a few the first time, we're still growing. But members serving members with their giftings. Spiritual formation. You have been a spiritual formation guide in your church, and you'd love to take on 6 folks and walk with them for a couple of months on some spiritual formation materials. We've got plenty of materials if you want to be a facilitator. So stay tuned and be on the lookout for those opportunities. But if you've got ideas, bring them, because when it comes to those offerings, we really do rely on the membership to bring things to the table.
Beth, I wanted to kind of touch back, if you don't mind, on something that Laredo, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah, it's something you said. I'm also a graduate student in a development group, and we have students from across the world. And actually, one of my good friends is from Africa. He's there in our class, and I can see exactly kind of what you're talking about when you talk about, he is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he's done so much in his history, but the way a meeting is ran is so different. I don't know. He's so much more polite than me. That's what it is. And I am just such a loud person. And I think that that's so important. So I love to touch base later on and I'm certain many of you have input on that and kind of put together a discussion forum or something that what makes you feel like you have a voice in a meeting. And And just so that you know, I am a firm believer that Americans need to learn a lot. We don't know nearly as much as we seem to look or sound like we think we do. I think there's a level of, and I say this as an American, there's a level of pride that we just carry, and not the good kind of pride, that we just carry in the forefront, that we know so much more. And so I want to learn. So please, if anyone has any ideas and thoughts, please, we'll start a discussion forum about it, and we can kind of share a little bit of our own cultures and how we work. And then something else I wanted to talk about is something back to Carla, what you mentioned about how families, even though they have different kind of backgrounds, they have different identities. One of my family members has like a severe mental health issue, and I noticed it is so amazing to see. I have 6 siblings and 2 parents, and it's so amazing to see that regardless of like some of the stuff he does and says can be so hard to take. They're just hard things to hold. And I think what spurs us forward as a large family, as a large group of people, is that we care about him in his heart and his humanhood, his personhood, more than we care about not our own, but like then we care about what that reflects onto us, and that supplemental faith behind that really does support that. And so I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that. I just thought I'd share a couple of things that are a little bit tangible and maybe affirming.
I mean, first of all, I want to thank you for being vulnerable in that way. And I think for me, the message is how do we get to that, right? When you see this kind of beauty, and there's tidbits everywhere in every culture, including, American culture, how do we tap into that? And how do we allow that to come to the forefront, so that so many of the negative things that we're bombarded with, which take up so much of our human space, is put aside? And I think if we can get into that conversation, you will see a sense of belonging that's organic that happens. I mean, the simple fact that you're even able to note in your own space that, when you're in an environment and there's an African man who has a lot to bring forward, there's already been a connection with what Laredo said and how I brought it to the table. Like, it's there and it can happen organically. And so I think for me that the conversation becomes the creation of that space and having these conversations, because all of these cultures have beautiful things that we can all learn from, right? If we allow ourselves I'll say the mental space, for lack of a better way to communicate, to be open to it.
Yeah.
Prince David has his hand up.
Thank you. Hi, Prince.
Yeah, there's a lot of lovely stuff that has been shared, and I, as an Asian man in a mega transition with my feet here in the US, was sensing that Asian men are like American men, and I'm sure the African men are also like the Asians and American men. We live in a fallen world, and we need to recognize that everybody is affected by that fall, and therefore that fall has impacted the way we use language. You struggled with the issue of the word alliance, and you had more than 100 options, but we chose to go with the word alliance. Actually, alliances are well received in Asia. The word is very well received and inclusive, is very well received, and there are no significant negative connotations, let me put it that way. And I'm sure that's the case in Africa. But who knows, things will change over time, and we will always have that challenge. The important thing is we continue to reclaim that vocabulary which God has given us, the word that created, and continue to focus on, whilst we have a challenge, we also have a God who gave us that word. And we continue to fine and refine that and continue to reclaim its positive meaning. Now, coming to the hands-on work that happens in, and I can say more about Asia because that's where my experience has been with Tearfund for about 26 years, and prior to that in leadership development in India, is that we tend to have a much higher focus on development for women and children in our programming. Yeah. I suppose it's probably a donor need or a donor demand. And it's actually hugely counterculture in Asia. But in programming, unless it features, you don't get the funding. So, we have experts who will make sure that the projects and proposals actually carry that focus on, in a disaster, you need to make sure that women are treated in a special, if I may use the word, category. So in programming, we do very well. And I think that has somehow filtered down into the organizations, or maybe filtered up into the thinking of leadership. So the point that I now want to present is, and I think Carla probably alluded to that in her, or maybe mentioned that, is, so what's already happening on the ground? And what's already happening in the other parts of the world, in other countries, organically? What are our brothers and sisters talking amongst themselves? It's not that they are not facing the same issues. They are. I think we're in a very great place, in an opportune moment, that the movement has started here, but started here from here, but there is also a movement that's, I'm sure, happening in other parts of the world. How do we connect the movements together? And how do we bring in the voices of our brothers and sisters who are in other parts of the world, learn from their experiences, how they have overcome challenges? I suppose they face even a stricter and a more difficult overcoming the challenges of culture, because I don't think there's any culture that is inclusive. Every culture, everybody, it's so we are actually a counterculture movement. Yeah. And this counterculture movement is happening all over the world. God is at work. Yeah. So I just want us to be encouraged to draw from the experiences, the richness of what's happening in Africa. And I coach men, and I tell you, getting into those minds and spaces, I believe my coaching work kind of expands with this whole issue of men are struggling. Men are struggling in this space as well. And it's only when they open up in that sacred space, I feel like I'm standing on holy ground with them, challenging some of those issues. So, and there are other people who are doing a similar leadership development. Leadership development for most parts has been developing mostly men in the Asian context, because they were the ones who turned up, they were the ones who signed up, and there was a fraction of that participation from women. But I think gradually the scene is changing, and let's go out over there and see what's happening and learn from those experiences. I'm happy to talk further on any specific things, on any specific actions that can be taken from henceforth.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought up, the topic of men, because we've been very adamant, at least in our own conversations, with the steering committee and the team, that this is a space for women and men. If we focused on the elevation and promotion of women only, then we're not about building the kingdom table. And so wanting to make sure that, and we talk about this probably most in the book, when you create a culture of belonging, it benefits women and men. But the historic power structure, makes it feel like it's threatening when you start to elevate women. We assume that there's a theology of scarcity. If somebody else gets some power, some greater influence, then I get less. And that's not how God's economy works. So wanting to make sure that the Alliance becomes a place where we can have conversations about creating better cultures within the sector and within our organizations, because it's going to benefit women and men who serve there even greater. But that's, that can be a hard sell when fear and cultural identity and all of these other things are at play or feel threatened. And so again, coming back to our original premise for today is, how do we create this space as a space of honesty and no fear of being removed, from the table if we don't like what you're saying. Because that's the third question. You heard me pitch out these questions that I've been hearing. Is this for white women? Is this a Western thing only? And then the third one from men is, are men welcome here, truly welcome here? Not just, superficial, sure, come along, you can listen in, but be quiet, but are men welcome here? And, to that we say, again, a resounding yes. But I do fear, Laredo brought up that question about people are tired of white saviorism. And so how many people are looking at this Christian Alliance and just at first glance saying, that probably wouldn't be a space for me. It sounds like a bunch of white savior women, trying to fix yet another problem that we actually contributed to the creation of. And so how do we, continue to communicate and push past that so that we are welcoming in those voices? And then for those of us who are in that white American mode, are not driving it. We're the listeners, we're the learners, but that this becomes a space where Laredo is going to be our facilitator for the next 6 months and leading us. And, when she's done her Drew University degree, how's that? But do you see what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? How do we all find that space where this is a place that I want to own? So that we all leave this table saying, I'm an owner of this community. I'm an owner of this network. I will help shape it. I will help make sure I'm inviting my friends in, and that we're pushing the conversation so that we are talking about white saviorism, so that we are talking about the footprint that historic behaviors of NGOs have left on us. And we now want to change that. And we want to reclaim that and create a community that does look more like the kingdom of God and what Revelations paints for us. So, yeah. Latasha, is your hand up?
Yes, it's up. I was listening.
Yeah, I'm
Hi.
sorry you put your hand up. I
been-
didn't see you. You didn't show up on my screen. Hi there.
No worries.
Latasha's on our steering committee.
I'm listening to the conversation. I've been here since probably about 8:30. I am excited as always. Prince, thank you for your comments. And I think in light of the deaths recently in this world, your comment about men and needing their space as well. And it just hit me, Beth, when he was saying that maybe that's how we draw the section of men in, particularly now when we've had some really high profile men who've committed suicide, to have a conversation, to bring males, to have that, Jackie, that space in our platform for men to have this conversation. And maybe we need to bring Prince along to really guide the conversation for them, and help them have this safe space. That shows that we're not just talking about being open to men, but that we're here to help you have a space where you guys can come in and be safe and discuss what you need to discuss. I love the counterculture. I'm like, okay, let's start another discussion so that we can have these conversations and to be intentional about making sure that it's not just the typed discussion, but that then we have these Zoom calls and points where people can come in. If you want to show up on screen, you show up on screen. If you don't, you don't. It's not that you have to be on screen, but we want your presence and your voice in the space. I also agree that it is, and we know we talked about this in the steering committee. My thought always was that eventually we go into these meetings where we're doing real retreats, not the little working retreat, but like the real retreat that my Catholic school upbringing taught me, where you laying on the floor and you meditating and then you leave and you go and you reflect. That's a real retreat. That centers me back into myself and allows me to leave the retreat ready to go and work with those who've been at the retreat with me. So I'm just excited that everyone is here today, and that this discussion, I've been listening intently as I'm having my cup of coffee. So you guys are really, we are really looking to get the platform developed and to have discussions. So I would say definitely reach out if you have a discussion that you want to have started so that we can start to do this. I've always been saying I love to talk and get concepts together, but coming from my church background where 1 or 2 are gathered, if only 2 people show up for Bible study, we still have Bible study. So let's just get it moving. And once it's there, people will come. And just continue to speak on it. And promote it.
You've raised a great reminder, Latasha. So one of the things that we have that platform. So Deborah and I both went on the HighBright platform at the same time. So that's the company that runs the Micah Global platform, that community that you now have all been invited to join. We have the Christian Alliance technology platform. And so what we'd like to see is maybe we'll post a discussion board on this topic. And so you can log into that community and keep the conversation going in between these monthly, table talks, because once a month may not be enough. And just share other thoughts as they roll across your mind in the next day or two about this, ideas, barriers that we need to overcome. Hey, don't forget, but we can keep the conversation going there. So I see that we're coming up on our time, and I just wanted to thank you profusely for participating today. This was really good conversation. It was recorded, and I think Jackie sends out the recording to you later when it's finished up. So you'll get, because you signed up for this, you'll automatically get the email with the recording. So, but again, we'll create an online discussion board for this so that as other thoughts come to mind, please post them there. And you can always reach out to us directly.
I just have a couple things. Please don't expect the email promptly. It is 12:30 in the morning where I am. I'm in Australia, so I'm gonna take my time with that. But I would also like to just close this out. Carla, I don't know if you feel comfortable, or if, Beth, or if either of you would like to pray just to close this out and thank God for our time. I don't know if you want to. Carla, I just thought I'd give you the opportunity first.
Carla, you want to close us in prayer and have the last word?
I just need you to unmute. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just noticed that. Sure. Father, I'd like to take this moment to thank you for the time that we've spent together. We've had very rich conversation, and the love that's in the room, and the true respect and desire for us to come together as community in a time when there are so many negative forces that are working against love and community. It's just a beautiful thing. And so we thank you for the time that we've spent together and our ability to really discuss issues that are going to make us stronger and whole and really live in the image of what you would like and you believe your people should be. And you've put down the foundation for your people to be. So I want to thank you for the time and the voices and the true spirit that was part of this meeting. Father, we ask that you continue to strengthen us so that we can come together again, and that our voices become not a whisper, but become a shout, and something that can be heard, felt, and really lead throughout the world. In your name I pray. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
So,
thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Carla.
Nope, I was just going to say I really do appreciate the time with everybody, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work. Thank you very much, Beth, for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great day.
Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.